Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're doing fantastic on this Thursday morning. If you're live and if you're watching later on, I hope you're doing fantastic regardless. Hey, listen, so let's go ahead and start with some housekeeping. I want to make sure you can see and hear me okay. So do me a favor, chime in real quick. Let me know that you can see and hear me, and we'll get going. In a lecture I was doing a little while ago, apparently my video started to go blurry after an hour or so. So we'll see how it goes this time. Daniela, thank you very much. Looks like you can see and hear me, so great. All right, well, then with that, let's go ahead and jump into today's lecture. It's going to be another short one today. We're just kind of introducing some ideas, right? Hopefully, you're doing all the readings as well, and you're also watching the additional videos and listening to the podcasts and reports that I've provided. If you're doing all that, then you're picking things up nicely. Don't worry. We are actually going to continue our discussion of globalization today. Welcome, school. I don't know who school is, but that's all right. And Ash, hey, looks fantastic. Ash is with us. We're talking about globalization still, but today we're shifting gears and we are going to be talking about the concerns and problems of globalization. Yes, there's a lot of great aspects to globalization. We touched upon some of them in our last lecture, and we are going to be going in depth on them all throughout this semester. However, that doesn't mean it's all roses. There are some very, very serious, very disturbing aspects to globalization that we really need to understand and be aware of so that we can mitigate for this and bring about better, more just solutions for everybody on the planet. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about some of the concerns. One concern you're going to get a lot is loss of manufacturing jobs and the export of service jobs, low-wage jobs. That's not wrong. They're not wrong. There is a loss of jobs. We're going to take a look at some of this data. Now, later on in the semester, we're actually, hey, Shalise, Nicole, fantastic. Great to have you. Later on in the semester, we're going to talk about why these jobs move. And in many cases, we want the jobs to move. I know that sounds weird. Bear with me. It'll make sense when we touch upon it. But just because there is benefit to some of the jobs moving and we actually want some of the jobs to move, that doesn't change the fact that jobs moving can mean lost jobs. So let's take a look at this. Manufacturing employment was fairly steady through the 1990s and so at about 17.5 million manufacturing jobs. But then by 2016, that dropped to 2.3 million manufacturing jobs. So that's a loss of like what, 4.5, 5 million, closer to 5 million, 5.2 million jobs. That's nothing to sneeze at. 5.2 million jobs, that's pretty darn significant. It's especially significant when you think of the fact that these are manufacturing jobs which often are built around factories and whole cities and communities, which means that when a factory closes, that's more than just a few thousand people out of work that worked at that factory. That means the entire community that supported that factory. That means the schools, that means the stores, that means the services, that means, the restaurants, the grocery stores, and you name it. Furthermore, it means a reduction in tax base since those people are no longer working there and that factory is no longer producing and paying out taxable revenue. that means that the tax base in that community has dwindled significantly. And that hurts. I mean, that really hurts. One of the things we talked about in our lecture on Tuesday is that, yes, Rio Tinto, an Australian company, employs, I think it was something, I forget the exact number, something like, 2,000 employees here in Utah, but they indirectly support 14,000 jobs. Well, same thing here. So if you're losing 5.2 million jobs, you're actually losing a whole lot more than that for these communities. Labor intensive sectors relying on low wage work took the biggest hit. 40% of job losses in the furniture industry, 45% in the clothing industry were a result of this shift in trade. So today, furniture is made in Scandinavia, being sold to us through IKEA. Clothing is being made in Bangladesh and Costa Rica, as we saw in the videos that you guys watched, right? So these sectors especially got hit really, really hard. And as I mentioned, it affects more than just the job that is lost. It affects the entire community, which affects the entire economy of a region. Let's look at some other things here. More output, less employment. The manufacturing sector has gotten more productive while giving fewer people jobs. Now, what this means is it's more than just moving jobs from the U.S. to other countries, which is happening a lot, okay? That's happening an awful lot. But we have included in this the automation of many manufacturing jobs. So, for example, if you have already watched, and if you have not watched, please do, the Planet Money video series on making a t-shirt. So when you look at where the cotton is changed and changed into thread and yarn and so forth, processed. There we go. When we look at where the cotton is processed, as they said in the video, there was nary a human being in sight. Here you have this massive, massive facility that just brings in all of this raw cotton, and through an incredible assortment of huge machines, they're able to turn that cotton into thread and yarn, and then turn that into fabric, and then ship the fabric off to be made into t-shirts and so forth. That's all automation. And an awful lot of the change in jobs that we're seeing is more than just globalization, it's automation as well. But it's not all just automation. This is really, we're really seeing a shift in where certain work is done. Now, in future lectures, we're going to talk about this in detail. We're going to talk about the concept of comparative advantage. And comparative advantage necessarily means sending the work to where it can be most efficiently and most effectively produced. We're going to talk more about that, but it does mean shipping jobs overseas. Now, I have some experience in this. Hey, Joa. So here's my experience. I was with Intel Corporation, and we, it was an HR department here in Utah. Well, we were closing the site here in Utah, and so we sent a lot of our work to Costa Rica and to Malaysia. And so many of our payroll processors actually went to Costa Rica for 3 months to train their replacements. These employees were being laid off because we were shipping their jobs overseas, and we actually sent them overseas to train their replacements. They did the same thing with me. Happily, by the way, we'll get to this. I went to Malaysia for 3 months, and I trained my replacement and my team's replacements in Malaysia. Now, I'm a believer in the global economic system. I'm a believer in comparative advantage, which we'll talk about in future lectures. I'm also a believer that Costa Ricans and Malaysians deserve the opportunity to earn a paycheck just as much as an American. And I also believe that Intel Corporation has facilities and customers and interests all over the planet. It is a global organization like we talked about on Tuesday. So therefore, it is a global company with global manufacturing and global marketing and global production and global distribution and global customers. Why would an American job be more sacrosanct than a Costa Rican or a Malaysian job? Now, just so you know, my father and I disagreed on that point. He thought it was pretty darn awful that I was losing my job and sending it to Malaysia. But I'm actually pretty much at peace with it. And we'll talk about that all throughout the semester. Nevertheless, this stuff is real. We are losing jobs. It is affecting the economy. It is affecting livelihoods. It's not made up. Okay, I'm going to take a quick drink. Alrighty, so let's keep going. We've also got concerns around lack of regulations internationally. This is very true, especially, well, in many ways. Let's take environmental regulations for a moment. One of the chief concerns of globalization is that it is not a level playing field. Not everyone is playing by the same rules. So, for example, if labor is cheaper somewhere else, well, that could be because they're not given the same benefits, they're not given the same pay, they're not given the same safe work environments, OSHA, and so forth. If production is cheaper somewhere else, it's because they may not have the same environmental regulations and so forth. Therefore, if other countries are not required to play by the same rules, yeah, they can price us out of the market every single time. So this is a concern on every front. It's especially a concern on the environmental front. Now, by the way, I see here, Shalice said, I got laid off from my job because of outsourcing, 900 employees out of work. Yeah, this stuff is real, right? And that's actually a real world example as well. And then Ash, my husband, did as well. 300 out of work for cheaper labor, right? Another great comment and new contributor and awesome comment and real world example. This stuff is real. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about this in depth, as I said, but here's the thing. I'm going to let you in on something. When it comes to layoffs, layoffs are like fire. They're neither good nor bad. It's just how they're done and why they're done. Now, as somebody, me right here, right? Okay. This dude right here. As somebody who has been laid off several times, I am keenly, intimately, painfully aware of what that does to one's sense of self-worth and self-esteem and what it can do to you economically. But when it comes to making decisions for a company, for a corporation, for an industry, for a region, layoffs are a regular part of that. We will talk in this course and through these lectures on what makes for an appropriate, correct layoff and what makes for an inappropriate, incorrect layoff. I have experienced both. I've experienced layoffs such as with Intel Corporation, where I am so loyal still to that company that I will not buy any competitor's product. I am Intel through and through. But that's because they did the layoff in the right way for the right reason and treated us properly. I've also worked for other companies and been laid off that I won't even, waste air saying their name. Okay? We're going to go into depth on this. Thank you for sharing that, though, Shalice and Ash. It really goes to show this stuff is real. It's not academic, is it? Okay, so same thing goes with environmental controls. We have tons of environmental controls, thank goodness. In fact, we probably need a hell of a lot more environmental controls here in the United States. But likewise, we need environmental controls all over the world, and we can't control that. And so, as oh, good, Shalise, I'm glad to hear your company did a great job. That actually makes me feel really good. Really good. So yeah, we have icky air every once in a while here in Utah. We understand that, the inversion. We don't love it, and we want to fix it. It's actually gotten a lot better over the last 30 years, but we would like it better still. However, you go off to Beijing, China, and you can't breathe that air because they have different environmental regulations, which is why we can get really good, cheap products from China. Okay? So, no, wrong button. Okay. So, another thing about regulations is around child labor. I actually want to spend a fair amount of time on this one because I think I'm very, very, very disturbed to say that I think the majority of us, myself included, we don't really think about this very much, and we tend to think that this is a rare, infrequent, outlier phenomena. That for the most part, we really don't engage in child labor anymore. We've pretty much wiped that from the history, and we're more sophisticated and so forth. It's really not. So let me give you some examples, all right? And you saw some examples in the readings. So this is from the International Labor Organization, from Department of Labor. These are all reports from the Department of Labor. International Labor Organization global estimates. So there are over, let's see, of the 152 million child laborers out there, 73 million were in hazardous work, 70% worked in agriculture, 48% were below the age of 12, and 58% were boys. Of the 25 million people in forced labor, 64% Asia Pacific region, APAC, 8 million in debt of bondage, right, indentured servitude, 4 million were government imposed forced labor. And here's the thing, it's in all it's not just the strange sort of weird little, product here or there, and they're kind of black market and you get them on the dark web. No, everything, okay? So, for example, coffee and sugar. Coffee and sugar is produced with a great deal of child labor involved. And I don't know about you, but I know my way around a sugar spoon. I ingest a lot of sugar. Your cell phone, okay? One of the things that we talked about, so this picture up here, these are kids who are actually mining cobalt. And you heard one of the reports in the readings where these children are out there mining cobalt to put into iPhones and my Samsung Galaxy and so on and so forth. And yeah, Daniela, based on the reading, Apple, Samsung, Sony accused of not checking to see if child labor was used in mining minerals. That's absolutely correct. So here's the way it's working, folks, is, okay, Apple and Samsung and Sony, they contract, let's take Apple, right? Apple, but everybody's guilty. I'm not just picking on Apple. Apple contracts with Foxconn to produce their iPhones. Foxconn, then contracts with subcontractors to get the parts for this, for their manufacturing. These subcontractors then contract with subcontractors to get some of the parts and raw materials. These subcontractors contract with local folks to get the raw materials. So no, they do not work for Apple, okay? They are artisan minds. Like it sounds cute, right? The idea, as that report says, is these people are wandering around with the bag and paying these kids to collect the cobalt, and they load up the bag and take it to the processing, so on and so forth. So it's like 7 or 8, steps separated from although it's probably Intel too, from Apple and Samsung and Sony and so forth. And so, yeah, the company can legitimately say we don't employ children, but they don't follow it all the way back to the source of the raw material. Ash, in the Planet Money, it was stated that if the industry was absent in Bangladesh, this would be detrimental to the citizens. Couldn't that be the same in the case of child labor, right? Same claim made. Okay, this is really good, Ash. So first of all, that's like, oh, wrong button. That's like a 2-level awesome comment. And you are referencing a past lecture because you're referencing the material. Let's talk about this, okay? We've also got a lot more contributors now, Lon. Okay, so let's take Bangladesh, for example. They were saying it was really interesting because they said this is a difficult problem. But when they spoke with both sides, both industry and the activists, both sides agreed that the worst possible thing they could do is to take the industry away from Bangladesh. Okay, absolutely. And furthermore, notice that when they told the story of Jasmine in Bangladesh, on one hand, it looked like that was pretty abject poverty. I mean, that looked pretty awful. On the other hand, she was able to help pay off family debt. She was able to work in a somewhat safer environment than she had before. And she was able to have a little bit of spending money for now and again. Well, that ain't shabby, people. It's all relative to what you and I are used to. Now, if you had a job where you could pay off family debt and you felt that your current job was a little bit better than your last job and you could save some money and indulge now and again, you'd say this is okay, right? Furthermore, we're also going to talk next week in our lectures about this idea of culture in terms of, well, should we have universal standards of culture, or are we going to practice cultural relativism? And could it in fact be that, these children are better off mining? Now, personally, no. But now let's look at how I am imposing my ethnocentric view on that world, right? I could say these kids shouldn't be mining. They should be at school. All right, isn't that cute that you think that they have schools? Isn't that cute that you think that they have a whole, economic and business infrastructure and social infrastructure in place such that if they were not mining, they would be in school? That may not be the case. Furthermore, it may be that their mining is keeping their family alive. And so if I'm coming in saying, I find it morally reprehensible, which I do, that that child is mining, the alternative may be, well, we could starve, I suppose. Would that make you feel better? Oh, yeah, I'd feel a lot better if you would just starve to death. It is a complicated question. But by simply writing it off as complicated and then saying, oh, well, it's just too difficult to think about, it's complicated, I'll let somebody else worry about it. No, we need to be aware of this. We need to understand how our spending is affecting it. Nicole, at what point can we hold them accountable then, right? Absolutely. And how do we hold them accountable? Because we're talking about international laws. What international laws are in place? We're going to talk about this. How are they enforced? We're going to talk about this. What alternatives are there? It's messy, right? Very good, guys. Very good. You're keeping the comments coming. I love it. Gold. Here it is. Gold ring right there. Chocolate. Yeah, I had chocolate last night. Clothes. I'm wearing clothes right now. Child labor. Toys. And then sushi. Haven't had sushi in a while. I mean, I love it, but makeup. Yeah. Leather, shoes. There are so many ways, right? So here's the question I want to ask, and I want to kind of get some ideas out there. Why do we not want to think about this? And I am making an assumption. So I do. It is incorrect for me to make an assumption that you do not think about this, because it could very well be that you think about it ad nauseum. Okay. So let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase in saying, what do you think we could actually do? Not conceptually, but what could we do today to be better aware of how child labor fits into what we buy, and what could we do to adjust for that? So this is not an easy question. I'm going to give us a couple of minutes to play with this, and let's see what we come up with. Reiterating, what can we do to better understand how child labor affects the things that we consume, and what can we actually do to help make a difference and to help address this problem? So let's play with this. Not an easy question, not meant to be. Okay, let's come back and look at this. By the way, we have got easily 5 awesome comments there. So we're taking this bad boy up to 10. Okay, so this is what you're going to do. We're going to do the same. We're going to do this every time. Send me an email that says 102910. Just 102910, and that will tell me that you were here and present, and that you were part of this great conversation that we are having. And I've also see that we are getting up there in contributors as well, so that is fantastic. All right, let's take a look at some of these comments. And you guys, you're thinking about this well. I like it. So let's see. I'm trying to find. Here we go. Shalise says we don't see it happening and can't imagine it happening to our kids, and so when we think about it, it makes us sick to our stomachs. I really relate to this because I think before I really studied this issue out, I made the naive assumption that, as I said before, these are rare occurrences, that this is a practice that has been more or less erased from the world, and that any time that child labor is used, it's for the strange little dark web things, not daily consumables, but like chocolate. And so when you learn that it is, yeah, chocolate's a daily consumable in my house. When you learn that it is a factor, it's highly disturbing. And frankly, you don't want to think about it. Or at least I should say, I don't want to think about it. It's very tough. Yeah, it's a really hard question. I totally agree. First, by asking, where are the materials being sourced from? So, Alma, I really like this because there are cases where you can actually find out where are the raw materials from. A classic case is when you're buying diamonds. Yes, I understand you only buy diamonds about 3 or 4 times a month, but still, when you buy a diamond, you want to find out, is it a blood diamond? Where is it being sourced from? In the case of diamonds, they are actually required to show where it's from. You can also research where certain places get their materials and so forth. Personally, I tend to think that the more local you shop, the safer-ish you are, but that might just be an assumption on my part, okay? Let's see. Yeah, Shalise, very good to ask that. Ren, one way we can understand it better is to take the time to research it. I can't think of anything I can do today to help. I am positive that there are websites, government websites, and NGOs, non-government organizations that can help you make good decisions. This PDF here that you see here, this is from the Department of Labor. There's a link down here to the PDF. I know you can't see that, but you can search for this, or I'll include a link in the description. It is like a 30-page report on child labor. And it has a lot of tips and tricks and so forth to help you with that. So, Ren, you're absolutely right. Research. Okay, Nicole, I think being more aware is a start. Yes, I agree. Line needs to be balanced in order to fix this. Yeah, totally agree. Elevate our shopping habits. I like that, Alma. Yeah. Sometimes it's better to pay a little bit more, right? Shalise, I don't know that we ever do know fully, right? These families, hey, by the way, so Nicole, these families can live and so forth, right? Hey, did you know that child labor is legal in the US? I'm not being cute. I'm going to tell you exactly where child labor is legal and encouraged. Family businesses. If you own a family business, then you are allowed to hire your children as employees, and no, you're not required to pay the minimum wage. Yeah, isn't that something? Okay. Yasmin, oh, fantastic. We have Yasmin contributing. Great. I think just learn more about it, right? Yeah, petitions. Becoming active in the cause. I agree. Very good. Daniela, it would be hard to find out because, yeah, it's something that company hides. And sometimes it's really, really hard to dig all the way down to those 7 layers of disconnect, right? 7 layers of separation. That's the word I'm looking for, right? Yeah, I totally agree. And countries, they want to kind of keep this on the down low. You're right. It is really tough. Tough doesn't mean we ignore it. As you said there earlier, just being more aware of it can help, right? Good. Very good discussion, folks. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Okay. Now, there's another concern. This is our last one, I believe, on international globalization businesses, and that is supra-organizational policies. Okay, so let's define what we mean by a supra-organization, right? Says right down here. A supra-organization is a multinational union or association in which member countries cede authority. They give up some of their power and authority and sovereignty. We give up our sovereignty, at least to, some international matters, to the group. These decisions are binding on its members. In short, member states share in decision-making on matters that affect each other's citizens. Okay? So, for example, we, the United States, are members of the UN, and we are members of the World Trade Organization. That means that the UN and the World Trade Organization can put in place policies that we must obey. We don't elect the people in the UN or the World Trade Organization. We have a say in them. We actually have quite a bit of say, right? But still, when they make a rule, we have to obey. Now, this is why, Britain exited the European Union, the EU. This was one of their chief concerns. Britain was fed up with the idea that the bureaucrats who they did not elect, off in Brussels, could make laws, rules, and regulations for the EU that Britain had to then obey. And so, as you know, with Brexit, it got really, really, really ugly. And we don't know what the fallout is yet. Nevertheless, it was because of supranational organizations making rules that they couldn't abide that caused them to leave. Now, United States, you notice, we're called the United States of America, which means, well, we're a country, but we're a country of United States, which means each state has its own sovereignty. You know that if you've studied your American political theory thought class thing. So each class has each state has its own sovereignty, and so each state can make its own rules, laws, regulations concerning how it runs its business. However, they always have to abide by what the United States says, right? Now, of course, they can elect. They do have a say in that election, but the idea is we cede a certain amount of our sovereignty. We let go of, give up a certain amount of our sovereignty to be part of the union. Well, countries do the same thing, but in this case, they're unelected, right? So this is a major concern. By the way, we have one last comment from Alma. I think many companies do not know what they produce, may have child labor, issues. I agree that companies may be pretty ignorant of these things. So you can't, I don't blame Apple. I don't blame Samsung. I don't blame Sony per se. And I have all three companies' products in my home. But they need to be more aware too, and they need to try to make changes. After all, I think they can make change more effectively than we can, but that is not to say that we should not give up on trying to do anything. Okay. Another concern, as I apologize, there is one more, is the wage gap. All right. A big concern around globalization is the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And the data supports this, okay? The richest 1% takes home 188 times as much as the bottom 90%, okay? That's not small, right? Top 1% income share has doubled, while the poverty level has remained steady since 1968, okay? So in other words, the rich, the upper income, their wages have doubled since 1968, while the lower income, their wages have remained the same because they can take true advantage of all this and so forth. Richest Americans have had the fastest income growth. So if you're in the upper echelons of rich Americans, your income growth grows much faster than those on the bottom 20%. Okay. So, yeah, it's real. It's real. Nicole, this could be compared to the legalization of marijuana as legal in some states, but not at work. Yeah, totally, right? Some states allow it, some states don't. Each state is making. By the way, marijuana is still a federal offense. That hasn't changed. So while states are legalizing marijuana at different levels, as you say, Nicole, it's still a federal crime. It's just the feds have kind of made it clear that they're not going to enforce it. Interesting. Okay, here's the goal of all this, guys, in wrapping this up. Globalization is here. It's always been here, and it's not going anywhere. Okay? And furthermore, the benefits of globalization are tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. But that doesn't mean it's not coming at a cost, and that doesn't mean that that cost might be too high in some areas. The goal is not to curtail or roll back globalization, but rather to find better, more ethical, and egalitarian, just ways of doing business internationally such that everybody can benefit. That's what we're looking for. So as we go through these lectures, that's what we want to bear in mind. How can we do this in the best, most just, verdant way possible? Okay? And so there you go, everyone. Fantastic discussion today. Very, very good. Send me that email with the timestamp. I think it was 10:38:10, something like that. Just the times, just send me the email. I know. And I really appreciate the contributions. I understand that doing this over text and comments is not the same as in the classroom. But on the other hand, I also notice more people speaking up. Maybe it's easier for some folks to speak up when we're at a keyboard than in a room where everyone's watching. So I'm really enjoying the discourse. So we're going to come back next week, not Monday because Monday's a holiday, but we'll come back on Wednesday and we'll talk about cultural differences and so forth. In the meantime, I'm going to stick around for a little bit on the comments. So if you have any questions, any comments, you want to challenge anything on the assignments, let me know. We'll talk through it on the comments. Otherwise, have a fantastic day, and more importantly, have a fantastic long weekend. Tuesday, you're right, Ren. Thank you. Ren, you're on it, man. Gal. So thank you. Tuesday. We're a Tuesday, Thursday class. I get mixed up, man. Thank you. Yes, we'll see you Tuesday and we'll talk about cultural differences. All right. Have a fantastic day. We'll see you all later. Tuesday. Yeah, totally. Tuesday. It's a man. Thank you, Ren. I appreciate that.